In the city of Chicago, tensions erupted into chaos one weekend as the streets became a battleground between federal agents and protesters. What began as an ordinary morning quickly escalated into a scene of unrest and fear when a border agent, responding to a direct threat, discharged their weapon at a driver who authorities claim rammed their vehicle into law enforcement personnel. The Department of Homeland Security later confirmed that the agent acted in self-defense, citing the imminent danger posed by the woman behind the wheel. Within hours, she had been released from the hospital and taken into FBI custody, a stark illustration of how quickly an already volatile situation could spiral beyond control. The ripple effects of this confrontation extended far beyond the initial incident. In the Brighton Park neighborhood, the air was thick with tension as anti-immigration protesters clashed with federal agents late into the night. Objects flew through the air, rocks, bottles, and other makeshift projectiles hurled by demonstrators at officers who had been deployed to enforce the law. At one point, law enforcement officials resorted to using tear gas to disperse the increasingly aggressive crowd, and the situation was punctuated by shouts and commands echoing through the streets, urging people to step back and avoid further escalation. The scene was captured in disturbing audio, a cacophony of panic and confrontation that revealed the extent of the volatility. Law enforcement reported that the confrontation was far from isolated. In Broadview, Illinois, anti-ICE demonstrators had been staging gatherings for weeks, and these protests were growing progressively more confrontational. Federal authorities described instances where officers were ambushed by individuals intent on causing harm, vehicles used as weapons of boxing agents, creating life-threatening situations. DHS officials detailed that some of the protesters were armed, including at least one person in possession of a semi-automatic firearm, and some had histories of dangerous behavior. Among those identified was Anthony Ian Santos Ruiz, alleged to be driving one of the vehicles involved in these aggressive maneuvers. The atmosphere in the affected neighborhoods had deteriorated to the point where law enforcement was operating under extreme duress. A 10-car caravan reportedly surrounded and trapped federal agents, forcing them to fire their weapons in self-defense just to extricate themselves from the perilous situation. Adding to the tension, authorities disclosed that bounties had been placed on the heads of specific agents, with sums ranging from thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, and photographs of these officers circulated among networks of extremists. Such threats intensified the sense of danger for those tasked with enforcing the law, underscoring the perilous environment these confrontations were part of a broader national context of unrest surrounding immigration enforcement facilities. In Oregon, protests outside the IC facility in Portland had similarly drawn large crowds, with nightly confrontations that mirrored the violent incidents unfolding in Illinois. In response to these escalating tensions, the Trump administration announced plans to federalize hundreds of National Guard troops to protect federal property in Oregon, a move that prompted criticism from local officials, including Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. He publicly opposed the deployment of military personnel to his state, asserting that there was no justification for armed troops operating within state borders against the will of local authorities. Interviews with law enforcement experts and defense attorneys highlighted the severity of the situation. Observers noted that organized groups of protesters were becoming more coordinated, with clear intentions to intimidate and harm federal agents. Reports indicated that some individuals had already planned targeted attacks on officers, further compounding the risks faced by law enforcement personnel. The accounts painted a stark picture of a nation grappling with the limits of order and safety in an environment increasingly defined by confrontation and defiance. The human dimension of the story was equally compelling. Law enforcement officers, dedicated to their duty, found themselves under constant threat. Many had to take extraordinary precautions to protect their identities and ensure the safety of their families. The sense of vulnerability was pervasive, a stark reminder of the sacrifices required by those who serve to uphold the law. Public statements by Homeland Security officials confirmed that officers had been forced to defend themselves against armed citizens, and that such defensive actions were entirely justified given the circumstances. Meanwhile, local law enforcement's response, or perceived lack thereof, was a point of concern. Some officials questioned whether city police adequately supported federal agents during the confrontations, prompting calls for investigation. Experts emphasized that mutual support among law enforcement agencies is critical, particularly in high-risk scenarios, and any failure to provide backup could exacerbate an already volatile situation.